Let's go to Victorian Liberal MP Katie Allen now. Thanks for joining us, Katie. These Greens, if these voices of independence are running around the country, mainly in Melbourne and Sydney, of course, but in Perth as well, if the Greens like them, if the Greens want to work with them, if the Greens mainly won't even run candidates in the seats they're running in, it gives the game away, doesn't it?
Well, it seems to me that the Greens have almost got a relevancy deprivation syndrome going on. So they, certainly seem to be singing from the same songbook, but it's all about looking to bring down the coalition government. This is really a Voices of Labor movement, and it's not surprising that the Greens are cosying up to them.
Yeah, it is. It's not surprising, but I think it adds some transparency when you see that. I want to ask you about Catherine Deves, the Liberal Party endorsed candidate for Warringah. We've had her on here a bit. She's been a champion for the rights of women and girls in sport. She's railed against women and girls having to compete against people who were biologically male. And she's come under attack today. She's not doing interviews. There's been an apology for posts in the past. Is this an argument the Liberal Party should be running away from, or should they not have it? Don't 90% of the population think that we've got to look after the rights of women and girls, at least in sport, without demonising or doing anything to discriminate against trans people?
Well, sport's a big term for a lot of different events that happen. So, it's from ping pong to swimming to athletics. There's a lot of different sports, and each sporting body seems to manage all these things very well. So I'd leave it with the grassroots approach about sporting bodies dealing with what they're having to deal with regards to these sorts of issues.
But is there any problem with actually articulating this view that you believe girls and women should have the right to only compete against people who are biologically female?
Well, the question is, in some ways, about whether people think someone may have an unfair advantage, and that really comes down to individual situations and individual sports, depending on what sport, is being talked about or is being discussed. And so, when you talk about biological issues, then it needs to be discussed in the context of that particular sport.
I want to ask you also about what's happened with George Christensen, obviously formerly LMP member for Dawson. Big news overnight that he was going to switch to One Nation. I would have thought the Liberals very, very relieved that he's not trying to win his old seat of Dawson as a One Nation candidate. He's going to be number 3 on the One Nation Queensland Senate ticket, which means he's very unlikely to get elected. But it will help his severance pay, won't it? It will mean that he gets 6 months' pay leaving Parliament. Instead of leaving on his own terms as a resignation, he'd get none of that.
Well, I'll leave George to make his decisions about what he decides to do, and I'll leave it to the people who vote in Queensland to make their decision about who they think the best candidate is. My job in Higgins is to focus on the people and community that I live in and make sure that they know that a strong coalition government is going to be the right government to lead them to a strong economy and a stronger future. And that's what we're about, is getting out there and telling people what an enormously difficult challenge the last 3 years have been and how important it's been to make sure that you've got a government that's going to deliver for you, and that our government, having delivered, has a plan for the future. It's not a set of slogans. We've got the experience, we've got the strength, we know what we're doing, and you can be reliant on us to deliver for you.
Well, you've got a medical background, and Labor's big announcement today sounded a lot like Kevin Rudd's GP super clinics, but they're Medicare clinics, 50 of them around the country, where people can go for quick medical help, all bulk billed presumably, to relieve pressure on hospital emergency departments. That's a good idea, isn't it, to relieve pressure on those hospitals who have been actually overwhelmed during COVID, but they were pretty stretched before COVID anyway.
Well, the first thing to say is the AMA has themselves been saying this is literally tinkering around the edges. We know that the Kevin Rudd's GP super clinics were not successful, and we've heard already from the Australian College of Emergency Medicine that they don't believe that it's addressing the underlying issue, which is about hospital capacity.
Now, finally, I believe we're going to know within a few days who is going to replace Greg Hunt as Health Minister should the government be returned. Is your hat in the ring?
What I would say is that I have been representing the people of Higgins, and I'm very comfortable with all that I've done through COVID, and certainly having health experience has been an important contribution that I have made to the future of this country to make sure that we've had a good, strong response to the health issues that we have faced. Prime Minister and Greg Hunt have been very complimentary about the advice that I have been giving, but I'm a first-term MP. We
will see, Katie Allen. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Chris.
I don't know who they'll name as the next Health Minister. Could it be Katie Allen? I don't know. I will take up some of these issues later in the program with the Health Minister, Greg Hunt.